Well, hello everybody. It's 1 o'clock here on the East Coast, noon for where Michelle Green is joining us from beautiful South Dakota today. We're going to give it another minute or so as we get some folks signed on, and we'll be starting here very, very soon. As we're getting organized and everyone's logging on, I'd love for folks to use the chat feature to talk a little bit about, who are you, where are you dialing in from, what organizations are represented today. It's always interesting and fun to kind of see where everyone is coming from and taking time to join us. So if you could do that, that would be awesome.
I don't know about you, Jeff, out in your neck of the woods, but it is still blazing hot in my part of the world.
We got through some of the heat last week. It doesn't get to be 100 degrees in Columbus, Ohio, all that often, but we hit that and then some last week. So I'm glad that it's going to be cooling off a little bit.
A little bit of a break. All right, we got some friends joining in here. We're up to about just under, looks like just under 200 guests arriving so far. There's so many with us today. There is no way we will be able to acknowledge every location tuning in for all the fun today. But it's great to see so many familiar names and institutions floating through the chat. Thanks so much for participating, everybody.
Be curious to see if we get all 50 states checked off in this one because we've got uh, a lot of folks registered for this one, so should be great.
A few different sectors represented in the chat
I
as
know.
well. Thanks for joining us. A few more
All right.
trickling in here.
We'll give it another 30 seconds or so before we start this party. Steve Vale does get a shout out. Steve Vale, a longtime friend and colleague and client at Cal State Northridge, which, by the way, is going to make an appearance in some of our discussion here momentarily.
That's great. That's great.
I'm really excited that you joined, Steve. Thank you. All right. Well, let's go ahead. We've got a lot to get through in 60 minutes, and I am notorious for running long in these kinds of things. So I'm going to do my best to keep myself contained. I do get excited talking about this topic specifically, especially given the driver of philanthropic activity that it's become over the last 15 years. So today we're talking about principal and transformational gifts, but not sort of one-off conversations about them, but more how do you build a sustainable program that can have repeated success in principal and transformative gifts. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that. I did want to start with a quick story, and again, I'm glad that Steve Vale is with us today. One of my favorite longtime clients is Cal State Northridge in the San Fernando Valley outside Los Angeles, and while you may not have heard of them or you may not have been on their campus, I guarantee you've seen their campus if you've ever seen the movie The Karate Kid, because it was filmed on their campus. But I think one of the greatest examples of how principal gifts can really drive transformational growth for an organization is what we've seen at CSUN, Cal State Northridge, over the last 5 or 6 years. And it started with a $40 million investment from a donor, a household name many of you have heard, that was given to the institution because she and her team recognized that they had a mission that aligned very much with her philanthropy. She was not an alum, she'd never been to campus, but she understood the mission of Cal State Northridge aligned with the impact that she wanted to have in the world. That $40 million gift was invested by CSUN in some really core programming around their mission. They're a remarkable HSI, Hispanic Serving Institution. More than 50% of their students are first gen, and so they invested those resources there, and it really propelled the organization forward. Fast forward to just recently, and that same donor donor invested a $63 million gift in CSUN because, not just because of the mission, but because of how they executed and used those dollars in support of the mission. And it's just a great example of why it's so important to focus on principal gifts, to do a great job of using those resources to drive your mission forward and communicate effectively with a prospect after that, because you never know where those gifts are going to go. You know, principal gift donors make their first gift because they believe in your vision. They make their second and third and fourth gifts because they believe in your execution. So that's kind of the underpinning of our conversation today.
Well, Jeff,
Um, so,
Jeff, I was
yeah,
just going to
please.
jump in and say I'm so glad that you shared that story and that Steve was here to hear it firsthand. And Steve, let me reassure you that is not the first time I've heard Jeff tell that story. And he's just as excited each and every time he tells it, because it really is such a great example to get us started. So thanks for that, Jeff.
Yeah, awesome. I guess I should have introduced myself already. I apologize. Like I said, I get excited. I'm Jeff Hilpert, Senior Vice President with BWF Zuri. I'm in my 10th year with the company. I get the opportunity to work with a lot of our complex higher ed organizations and international nonprofits. And you'll hear me tell some stories about them later on. I'm in Columbus, Ohio today, and I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Michelle Green.
Thanks, Jeff. Hi, everyone. Michelle Green. I serve as a vice president on our campaigns and fundraising strategy team. I've had the good pleasure of now working alongside Jeff for a handful of years, and so many of you that are tuned in today. I hope you hear certainly some consistency of things that we've talked about over time with principal giving. I hope you pick up maybe a new way or two of thinking about this work today as well. I have the good fortune of working on campaigns from tens to hundreds of millions to even now a couple of billion-dollar campaigns and billion-dollar plus. The reach that we get to enjoy from this consulting profession is one that I know Jeff and I both are humbled to be able to do and to be able to talk to you about such an important topic today. So thank you so much for your time and your attention, and we'll do our very best to make it worth your while.
Awesome. And to that end, let's do a little housekeeping right out of the gate. Throughout the day, we're going to be putting some poll questions in, and would love for you to participate in those. It helps shape the conversation. It helps illustrate sort of where everyone is in their principal gift program maturation and development. If you, because of the size of the crowd today, we're north of 250 people. We would love for the chat to be robust. Talk amongst yourselves, share ideas and those kinds of things. I will apologize in advance. We may not get the chance to field all of those comments as we're presenting. But if you have a specific question you want us to answer, please use the Q&A feature, which should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you don't see it, you can click more and you can see the option there. We are monitoring that, and so if there's a specific question you want us to answer, please do use that. And then some of you have asked, will we get a recording of this that we can share with our colleagues? Absolutely. Within 24 hours or so, you'll get a recording. That's the word I was looking for. Um, all right, so a little bit about what the session is today, and what it isn't, which I think is as important as anything. The session really is about building the system to have remarkable and repeatable principal and transformative gifts. It's not around, building around one rock star gift officer who just does really well with this work. The places that have been really successful are those that have the most stable and resourced systems and processes in place. So we're going to be focusing a lot on that. We want to talk about readiness, not luck. Yes, we all hear the stories of a principal gift kind of falling out of the sky, but that's not the best strategy for growing your program over time. We want you to be ready to solicit and engage principal gift donors. So we want to talk about that. And it is about strategy. Toward the end of the conversation today, we're going to give you some building blocks of things that you should think about with your own program. We're not just going to sit up here and tell stories. I will say I am a storyteller. If any of you have ever spent time with me, you know that. You've already seen that a little bit in our conversation today. So we'll pepper some of those things in as well. This isn't a session where we're just going to tell you to ask bigger. or swing for the fences, or that only the big places, the massive institutions or nonprofits can have success there. That's not at all the case, and the research would indicate that's not the case. So we are firm believers that every organization, regardless of size, as long as you're disciplined, can have success in principal gifts. I will hazard a guess that you're spending time with us today because you know BWF Zuri, either as a client or you're friends with us, what have you. You may very well know BWF of 2 months ago. BWF Zuri of today is a little bit different. We're about a month into a merger with the Zuri Group to create what we think is one of the most exciting and dynamic and comprehensive fundraising consultancies in the country. You can see we're supporting just about 450 clients a year. We've got almost 200 people, and we've got deep specialization all across the spectrum of philanthropy. So my guess is if there's a challenge you're facing, we can probably help you answer it. And you can see here some of the verticals of work that we do. And this is probably the most duh statement I'll make all day because many of you are clients and friends, so you know that. But our company really does have four main areas of support, helping organizations think about campaigns and fundraising strategy, which is the work that Michelle and I engage in most. Donor experience and engagement, stewardship, annual giving, and those kinds of things. And by the way, we are not a firm that is comfortable with the idea that the everyday donor is just going away. We combat that every day with our clients. We spend a lot of time thinking about fundraising operations and technology as well, and that's why we're so excited about the partnership with Zuri.
All right, friends. But today, the name of the game is Principal Gifts. So it's really what we want to spend a bulk of our time focusing on. Certainly, it's why you all showed up. And let's start off with a couple of requirements. That's what we're gonna label these today. So first, really that focus strategy. You heard Jeff really lay the groundwork for what we hope to build on with today's content. Principal Gifts. As Jeff said, they don't happen by chance. We really truly believe they are a result of intentional planning. Every single prospect deserves clear strategy grounded in not only what the institutional needs or objectives are, but their passion. Perhaps a touch of their capacity doesn't hurt, but really the relationships and the timing and getting that mix right. Institutions they really do kind of limit and should limit the number of kind of these transformational priorities. We use that word a lot in our profession, to make sure that they really are compelling enough to inspire extraordinary investment and partnership to carry that philanthropy and that vision forward. The success is going to come from knowing where to focus. So we're going to talk a lot about discipline. Having the discipline to say no to distractions, having the discipline to not continue to invite new ideas, but to really focus in on the one the donor is most motivated by and has the potential to be the biggest opportunity for the institution. They do require a significant, or let's call it organizational or institutional commitment. Principal giving is not simply a fundraising program or initiative. We all know it takes presidents, it takes deans, it takes faculty, certainly advancement professionals, present company certainly included, and volunteers to all play their part in the band. So these opportunities, they can span years, they require patience, they require consistency, and that's why that commitment, regardless of disruption or leadership transition, but to that lasting commitment on behalf of the organization or the institution. For those of you who have spent any time talking with Michelle Green about principal giving, you're going to hear me use those words relentless rigor over and over again. So principal gifts really do reward disciplined execution. This is not just about showing up over and over again and eventually having enough trust stockpiled to be able to ask for a larger gift. Every interaction should move us forward, not only in the relationship, but toward a purposeful outcome. Starting with the end in mind should help propel us through the process that is required for significant investment. It also means, the fun stuff, the strategy documents, the next steps, the accountability, the portfolio reviews, the discussions that we have about these tip top priorities and prospects that could potentially fund them. That takes a cadence to carry forward these actions toward a positive outcome. And of course, true partnership. If there's one word that you're going to hear over and over again today, that partnership might be it. Principal gifts are co-created. And that's not anything new or novel. But the way that we're going to go about that work, as Jeff mentioned later in our presentation, and we hope that there's some things that you're able to take with you today to go and partner with those individuals within your campus, your clinic, your community, to get to that positive outcome. That collaboration, it extends beyond the co-creation with the donor. It should, of course, include our institutional leaders, subject matter experts, different members of the advancement team. This type of work is not done in isolation, and I hope that's one of the big takeaways from today as well. Jeff, we can hit the next one. So we wanted to address some of the definitions. So what are we talking about? And not just with dollar amounts. It would be really easy for us to say, okay, principal gift is this much or is this much. But we can do our best work when we're thinking about how those numbers are really relative to the institution that we serve. So I would argue a more meaningful way to think about gift levels is by that percentage of annual fundraising that they produce rather than an absolute dollar amount. It matters because at one institution, and I'm sure there's some present here today, that 500,000 or a million or less than or more than could certainly be a transformational gift. I'll use that word again. At another, that might very well make up a routine major gift. Wouldn't we all be so lucky? But the major and principal gifts they're not just important from the dollar amount. They're truly that economic engine that makes ambitious campaigns possible. It's why we spend so much time talking about them. So if you look at our definitions here, if a principal gift is going to account for 30 to 50% of your production, they deserve at least that much of our organizational attention, leadership, planning, focus. So we wanted to at least be able to kind of level set how we're thinking about these most significant, one might say, gifts to your institution. Okay, so in the next one, we're going to talk about how they differ from major gifts themselves. Jeff, you want to go to the next
Yep.
slide here?
Let's
We're
try. I was
talking.
distracted by the chat with all of the friends and current and former clients. So sorry about that,
That's
Michelle.
okay. That's okay. I'll let it slide this time. Oh, see what I did there. Okay.
I see what you did there.
Um, all right, so let's talk about some of these major differences. Major gifts and principal gifts share many of the same fundamentals, but they are not the same practice. So principal giving, really, we talk about it not being the major gift with another zero. I want to talk about not only how strategy shifts from securing that support, from existing priorities to partnering with donors, but the donor motivations and how they're different between the two. So major gifts are often motivated by certainly belief in mission. That's still important. Personal connection, gratitude. We like to think about that, as that kind of loyalty giving. I went to school here, and I feel like I want to pay it forward to the next generation. There's some responsibility there. Confidence in the organization, certainly, and absolutely a desire to make meaningful difference in the world. Principal giving adds another dimension to that. So, solving a significant societal, institutional challenge, leaving a lasting legacy can sometimes be a part of that. Influencing the future of a place that people care about, creating impact, but not just maybe on a program, but at scale, and impact that few others can. The cultivation can also look very different. We're talking about, centering on opportunities that already exist or creating things that perhaps we've never dreamt of. Principal gift cultivation is more about that. It's more than collaboration. That's certainly a part of it, but it's also going to be iterative along the way. The strategy is also different. Several of you, I know, are talking with your teams about this right now, that we have an outstanding major gift program but a best performing major gift program is not necessarily going to guarantee that we close principal gifts. But I will tell you that principal gift strategy, when done really well, I promise will strengthen your major gift program. Let's go ahead and tackle the next topic here and talk about how that effective strategy and opportunity can bring us here to a place where we really are, again, there's that word again, transforming. If we're changing institutional trajectory, not just, adding capacity or being additive on top of the programs or adding to the number of students we can serve or faculty we can hire, it, we can use that transformational word with confidence. It does not simply fund another building, a scholarship, a program, though that might be included. They really do alter what an institution is capable of becoming. Years later, we should be able to point to that gift and say, that's when everything changed. And so we just wanted to be able to put some definition around principal giving, transformational giving, and how the two can be synonymous, but aren't necessarily always.
Good. Um, One of the studies that I was involved with a few years ago was University of Sydney in Australia, and one of the core questions that they asked us was, is it true that a donor would give more if multiple units within the university went to them for a gift? What they were battling was this belief among some of their faculty that if we together to solicit a gift from a prospect, each of us would get smaller than had we gone and beaten the other person, the other organization to that. And so we did an exhaustive study interviewing some of their donors, looking at donors worldwide to some of the top 50 institutions. And what we were able to prove definitively was that was not the case. In fact, in conversations with donors, they said that they appreciated an organization that was coming to them with an idea that spanned multiple units on campus because it allowed them to exercise multiple things that they were passionate about in philanthropy. And so their giving actually increased. And so for those of you that may be struggling with, well, I just need to get there before athletics does or something like that, that is not the best donor-centered focus and is actually going to retard some of the gifts that you may get. All right, so you've heard from us for a lot. Now we want to hear a little bit from y'all, and one of our colleagues has just launched the poll here. We'd love to hear just really quickly. Where would you describe your organization today? Are you mature? Are you still building? Do you not have one? And so I'd love to take a few seconds here to see what the responses are.
It looks like the formal program, but still building, is has taken a quick lead, Jeff.
Yep, yep. It's like watching the Kentucky Derby.
I hate to break it to y'all, but we are in a continuous improvement line of business. I think that still building is going to continue maybe forever.
Yeah. Well, good. Yeah, I'm not surprised to see it break down the way that it is right now. For those organizations that are raising their hand and saying, we don't have a principal gift program. My guess is maybe some you are some of the smaller organizations or are struggle with resources and those kinds of things. We're going to talk about some solutions later today that may help with that. But it does seem that, hey, we've got a formal program, but we're still building it. Newsflash, as Michelle said, I think everyone is always going to be continuously building their principal gift program. And right when we get great at doing it this one way, there's going to be a shift in donor behavior. And we've got to think slightly differently. So great. Uh, appreciate you answering that. You can see the responses here. All right, so let's go on to our second poll question. Um, and we're just really curious, what resources do you have in place right now to focus on principal gifts? A few early leads here on we dedicated principal gift officer. Oh, looks like VP or AVP may be taking the lead here.
But it really is a pretty even mix.
Hmm.
We don't maybe the AVP or the VP is taking the lead here. But trying to figure out kind of creative solutions. There might be some dedicated staff here, but really, um, I would say a really good showing of folks who are thinking about that prospect review and strategy meetings as their primary tool to drive activity here. And we see a lot of that, especially I would say talent at this level, with that kind of sophistication and experience to be able to lead a program. It's a really competitive market right now. And so, congratulations to so many of you who are thinking about this, perhaps a bit more creatively outside of a traditional staffing structure.
Hmm. There's some other really great sort of nuggets that I see in some of the results here. You know, the president actively engaged in principal gift strategy. A large percentage of you selected that. I love to see that. We're going to talk about the importance of leadership here momentarily. I see a lot of concentration around some of the senior executives within the advancement operation, the fundraising operation, having primary responsibility for principal gifts. We don't that's not atypical. We see a lot of that. And as Michelle said, I love to see the results around strategy sessions. All right, so we're going to go to our final poll right now. We've got another one here in a little bit. How does your organization define principal gifts? Michelle used a few ranges earlier, but I would love to hear from the group about what is considered a principal gift. Seeing a lot, right? The concentration at right at a million. Um, a good number that are saying that they don't have a defined threshold, which is not surprising.
Jeff, when we were talking about the percentages and the kind of approach of annual production earlier, it reminded me of a couple clients that I'm working with right now they're coming off of about, we'll call it a range of right around a $500 million campaign. And they really did outstanding work at that $1 million plus level. Right. So that's causing them now in as they're planning for a next campaign to say, okay, maybe we need to think about that threshold again. Right. And again, as we're monitoring how much of our program is reliant on those fewer donors, it's a really healthy exercise for an organization to revisit this, especially ahead of a next campaign or a next significant effort.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm not surprised to see the concentration that we're seeing at a million. I'm curious and would love to know more if we had more time about some of those that say, hey, it depends on the prospect or it depends on the project. Love to have that conversation maybe offline sometime. But kudos to those of you that do have a defined minimum for a principal gift. I think that's a really important building block here. All right, so yes, today is all about building a successful and sustainable principal gift program. But let's talk a little bit about why are we even talking about this right now? And Michelle talked about some of this earlier, but campaign goals are it is an arms race. For campaign goals right now. And sometimes they're outgrowing our donor pipeline, especially those of us that are higher ed. We're sort of outkicking our alumni coverage, so to speak. And campaign goals just keep going up. I remember when I was the campaign director at Ohio State, we did all of the research, feasibility studies, and data analysis to come up with our goal that we were going to shoot for the campaign, which was just over $2 billion. We told our president that, and if you know Gordon Gee, he's also a fan of bow ties. He said, "That's great work, Jeff and team. Appreciate that." And he goes into a board of trustees meeting and announces a $2.5 billion campaign. So we knew what the prospects would support, but he had a slightly different vision, and we were able to accomplish that. We're also seeing, such a heavy reliance on leadership gifts because nowadays missing one or two principal gifts or a transformative gift makes or breaks a campaign. They don't just move the needle; they make or break the success of a campaign. And for those that are basing their campaigns on strategic plans, it really erodes our ability to execute some of those really critical things that are outlined in a campaign, in a strategic plan. And so we're also seeing a lot of other sort of challenges, and some of the poll results indicate that, a lack of real discipline, maybe an inconsistency in how we go about crafting and executing donor strategies. Maybe it's more of a personality around one gift officer who's really, capable at this, but organizations that succeed have a much more disciplined and consistent approach to this. And One of the other things that we're seeing, and I see this a lot with none of the clients that are on the call today, but the other clients that didn't join, underutilizing leadership or bringing them in too late in a conversation. Michelle used the term co-creation for principal gifts. So many donors at this level want to have to help shape how the organization is going to use this massive infusion of resources that they're going to provide, and they expect leadership access. They want those conversations with leadership, and so the places that we see that are struggling with principal gifts don't necessarily have a capacity problem. They have a strategy, focus, and a resourcing problem. They're not dedicating time, energy, and resources toward principal gift work in the way that maybe some of the most successful places do, regardless of their size.
So, Jeff, I think it's easy for us to kind of fall in love with our own ideas as fundraisers, and I think that gets a little bit to the purpose of why we need to come together and think about these types of opportunities that don't come along every day, more broadly. A lot of times when I'm working with development staff on how do I know when I've got a person who might be able to and might be interested in doing this. We could look at capacity ratings and make a lot of assumptions. It's a really important key data point, but it's not the only one. It still certainly takes the people power to sit down in those rooms and to be witnessing kind of the magic unfold that goes along with all that hard work to understand here's those key characteristics that I should be watching for. And if you've been in one of those conversations, when they reveal themselves, it's pretty incredible. So as we work to identify these types of donor investors, there's certainly some key characteristics we can keep our eyes and our ears open for. So visionary can show up in a lot of different ways. So what do I mean by that? They are drawn to not necessarily what already exists. That might be sort of interesting, but maybe not as motivating as what could be. They're often inspired by certainly bold ideas, but more importantly, not just the idea, but the outcome or the ambitious, even better outcome that idea could generate. Um, they're often asking kind of what's that bigger vision? Why are you asking for this? How does this fit into the bigger picture? More so than what would that take? Or my favorite question is, what does it take to create an endowment here? A question that I hope we all answer carefully. They want to invest in possibility, not just sustainability, which I think for especially in our clients in higher education is a tough topic right now. With enrollment challenges the way that they are, sustaining drives a lot of our day-to-day activity. So it's tougher for us to kind of pull out of the weeds and think about that possibility. These folks are legacy minded in many, not all, but many cases. They want to think beyond today's impact, often referring to future generations or tomorrow's generations. They want their philanthropy to endure, and that doesn't necessarily mean endow, but endure is to have that lasting impact that can be seen for those generations that we mentioned. And not always with opportunities um, that present themselves kind of one off or one at a time, but the things that do create that lasting change. Partnership. There's that word again. They want a seat at the table. These types of donors, we have to be careful as the facilitators, often of those conversations, that we are not inviting people into management of the institution, but to shape solutions, to charge us and challenge us to think bigger and differently. And they really do, this cannot be emphasized enough, value authenticity, that trust, dare I even say vulnerability. When Jeff talks about donor readiness and institutional readiness, be thinking about that vulnerability word. They expect access to leaders that they're partnering with to pursue what we hope eventually is a shared vision. And maybe one that I'll add as an honorable mention to the list is they're pretty comfortable with complexity. And what I mean by that is they are quick to recognize that meaningful change is not simple, it's not easy. And this is where we spend a lot of time coaching. development professionals, that we don't have to have all the answers. In fact, I know someone who might be wearing a bow tie right now who says, always be grateful for the gift of an unanswered question. Did I get it right, Jeff?
You did. I would love the unanswered question.
Yes. Let's go to the next slide here and talk about kind of the next element of all of this, which is what transformational gifts have in common. Um, they do have some predictable ingredients, is maybe one way I would describe it. Even if every gift is very unique, the trust and the credibility that exists cannot be underscored enough. Transformational gifts are made to the institutions and to the leaders, I would argue, that have earned the right to ask. The big clear idea, every transformational gift um, that I can think of begins with an idea worthy of a transformational investment. The number of times I've heard that from an advancement team is, we don't have ideas that are attracting transformational investment. There is certainly some truth to that, and it's our job to make sure that each idea that comes forward we're allowing folks to co-create and to make them even bigger with us. Alignment and confidence. Donors certainly look for confidence that the institution is united behind that singular vision. When we start to invite campus partners in a higher ed construct into, I'll use that as my example, into the conversation, they should all be telling the same story, right? It's one of the reasons that we um, make sure that that case is strong, even when we're introducing a new idea, if we don't have all the components and details built out yet. Donors' readiness, capacity alone, just because they have it doesn't mean it's for us or for us now. Timing, relationships, personal priorities, that's where the high trust relationship comes into play. We have to be respectful that they very well might be on their own timeline. It's our job to continue to make the case and to bring along that urgency into the mix. And they start with a question. So transformational gifts begin with curiosity and conversation more than anything else. I have one story that I hold dear and I think will for the rest of my career. Sitting across the table from a donor who asked me if there was one thing, Michelle, that we could solve together, what would it be? And why should I do it here? And it was the beginning of a really interesting and motivating day, reminding me of why I sign up to do what I do. The most important conversations are about those accomplishments that we aspire together to do, not dollar amounts to drive campaign goals. And I think that's an important thing for us to remember, especially when we're socializing this type of work with our campus and organizational even partners. So let's go to that big question. So every time, not just me, you've heard a colleague, a conference presenter, could be a mentor, share their big gift story. They kind of light up when they talk about it. There's this inflection point um, that'll describe, what is going to change, or what do we need to do differently, or what's going to be possible. This type of question it's not always going to be that overt. It might be around if resources weren't a constraint. It could be about how could I help make that happen? Um, there's a long list of ways that might come up in a donor conversation. The invitation is about asking and answering that question with a question, and not rushing to feel like we have to fill the silence or to answer those questions as soon as they're asked. Um, Not being shy about inviting others into the conversation. In some ways, if we feel like we have a donor identified to be in my top 10 in the next gifts I'm going to ask for, and suddenly they start having bigger conversations, it can feel a little bit like, oh my gosh, we just slowed this whole thing down, right? But inviting others into the conversation, you could be talking about a whole new thing, not just slowing that thing down. So be listening for that question. When the questions get bigger, I would share with you that the gifts often do too. And Jeff and I both have many stories to tell on that, though we don't have time to tell them today. But there's lots of examples, and I hope that some of you will share them with each other as well.
When I love, especially these last two bullet points, because when we're talking about principal gift prospects or those folks that have just remarkable capacity, they're problem solvers. That's how they've built their careers and their lives. They want to help impact the world in a way that they can't just do by themselves. And so, thinking about how do we build this, how do we solve this problem at scale, and how do we extend this beyond the institution are really critical questions for you to think about as you're engaging with them. And I'll tell a story here in a little bit, because of course I will, about an organization I worked with like that. So, all right. So again, this is all about building a sustainable and growth-oriented principle and transformative gifts organization. And all of you are sitting there saying, "Well, how do we do that?" I mean, some of you have already taken a lot of steps toward that, but a lot of folks jump right to the, well, who are our prospects? What's the gift amount? Who's going to be the solicitor? And I would actually encourage each of you, even those places that have a little bit more of a robust or a built out program, to say, if the right donor approached with the capacity to make the largest gift to your organization that you've ever had, are we prepared to move that gift forward tomorrow? And if not, what are the things that are going to slow us down? And it's the answer to that last question of what's going to slow us down, what's going to get us in our way, that gives you the answer of what are the steps that you need to take organizationally to get yourself ready. Is it internal coordination? Is it internal approvals? Is it alignment with the master plan? What have you? Those are the questions that help you take the actions to get yourself in a much better position. So let's talk about some of the sort of core ingredients here that you really do need for Principal Gives success. If you ever sat through one of my conversations or you've spent more than 5 minutes with me, you've probably heard me talk about Simon Sinek. Many of you have read his book. It starts with why. But for donors at this level, it does start with why. And if you don't have a remarkable idea that impacts humanity, or whatever ridiculous terms you want to use, then you're really not in a place to be successful with principal gifts, because donors at this level don't just fund budgetary needs. Typically, they want to bankroll and seed really big ideas. And so it really does start with big ideas that all of your leadership is aligned, and that's the next component as we're going around the circle here. There's got to be no daylight between your leadership. If the president and the provost are saying different things, or your chief program officer and your CEO are saying different things, donors hear that and it erodes their confidence. So you've got to be speaking with that one voice. And again, that's probably one of the more duh statements I'll ever make, but I see so many organizations in the last 10 years make that mistake where they have slightly different missions. The other element here is a really disciplined strategy and operation around principal gifts. Relationships are important, vision is really important, but if you don't have the systems and processes in place to be successful and support that, you will run into some real problems. We'll talk about some of that later on. I was really pleased in some of the poll results earlier to see how many have dedicated and resourced teams focused on driving principal gift activity, and I think that's really critical. That I want to be very careful, and I want to make sure that you hear me say this, that it is not a requirement that you have a separate standalone principal gift operation to be successful here. You just need to be disciplined, resourced, and focused in your work around principal gifts. So it is perfectly acceptable that your AVP or your VP is the one thinking about principal gifts and driving that work if you don't have a separate organization, but it's got to be part of their job. It can't be a side quest, to use one of my a term I hear from my kids, which always gets me in trouble when I do that. But it can't be a side quest. It's got to be core to what they do. Prospect development's got to be a huge piece of this. We're going to talk about that in greater detail here momentarily, but this isn't about just identifying, the small group of people that can make these kinds of gifts happen. It's about figuring out what's the best way to access those prospects, and that's where a sophisticated principal or prospect development team comes in handy. And we've talked about the importance of relationships. We are in a relationship business. AI will never replace that. And one of the key things about these relationships, as you heard me talk about with CSUN earlier, is thinking long term. Don't just think about a transactional, let's close this gift and move on. Let's think about this relationship in decades, because that's the organizational focus that we have to have as we're leading, universities or nonprofits. We've got to be thinking about that in a long-term way. All right, so those are sort of the core elements. Let's talk about some of the building blocks that make this happen. And as I said a second ago, you don't have to have a standalone principal gift team to be successful here. But what you do need to have is a focused and dedicated team, people that is part of their job. It's not something they do on the side. It is part of their job. Because if you don't have that and no one is waking up every day thinking about driving principal gift activity and stewarding those relationships and making sure that we're executing, you're really going to have a hard time. No organization can be successful with principal or transformative gifts if leadership isn't bought in and engaged. This is not something that the advancement or development team can do by themselves. This has to be built out of the vision that the leadership has, whether that's the president of the university, the CEO of the organization, or your departmental leadership. But there's got to be alignment and vision coming from there. This also has to be a team sport. We talk about that. It's almost cliche in fundraising anymore that it is a team sport, but there's got to be that partnership and collaboration, because these kinds of gifts can't be successful. We can't administer them. We can't build the building. We can't build the program if we don't have really robust and successful interdepartmental ownership and engagement. There's got to be that that strategy or that ownership and engagement. Sorry. Trying to look at a chat, and I shouldn't do that. I can't do two things at once. Dedicated and consistent strategy meetings that follow a consistent format. All too often, I see organizations that it becomes a cult of personality. Like I said, about one gift officer who does it this way. Can't do that. It's got to be a dedicated, scheduled, disciplined strategy meeting where you're using the same framework for each of the prospects that you're talking about, so that you are creating that consistency. And there does have to be some investment in infrastructure. Again, I'm not saying you've got to have a standalone team that's got, sort of a mini advancement enterprise, but you do have to make sure that you have the tools and resources to be successful here, because it is just different than some of the work that we do elsewhere. Um, Principal gift success doesn't happen by accident. Yes, the blind squirrel will find a nut every now and then, but if you want a sustained and repeatable principal gift operation, you've got to have that discipline system. And you're probably bored of hearing us talk about it at this point, but that is fundamentally the most basic element of principal gift success. Um, and principal gift success doesn't just come from asking for larger gifts. They come from institutions who are ready to think and act and operate differently. That's what we see at the most successful organizations we work with every year, there is that organizational commitment to doing things differently with principal gifts. All right, so there's five sort of repeatable systems that we're going to talk about today. Starting with the why, we'll talk about you can see them all here. So let's start with the why, because of course, why not? Does anyone recognize this picture? If you haven't seen it, or you haven't spent time with me, one of my other favorite clients is the Great Barrier Reef Foundation out of Australia. And they were, prior to us starting to work with them, they had received a $400 million grant from the government of Australia because someone needed to be the voice of the reef. The reef is under a lot of pressure. It's dying in some respects, and they wanted someone to be the voice of the reef. And so we partnered with them to help them build their donor base. And what we learned very quickly was there are remarkable philanthropists in Australia, but to really have an impact at the level that they needed, this is going to have to be something that applies to a wide donor base from all over the world who may never have been to Australia. And so as we started telling the story of the reef's health and resilience, what we realized is the story that we really needed to be telling was that this was a metaphor or a vehicle for climate sustainability and adaptation and resilience. So instead of focusing solely on the reef, we broadened that to think more about ocean health, environmental resiliency, and those kinds of things. And that really did open up a significant opportunity with global philanthropists, people that maybe some of your organizations have received gifts from. So that it's got to start with that robust and very inspirational vision that allows people to accomplish way more than they could do on their own. Prospect development is a critical piece here, and I'll be honest, when I was early in my fundraising career, I didn't see the value as much in prospect development. But you hear the term "the converted are the most passionate." I am fiercely passionate about the role of prospect development, not just in helping us identify who, the right prospects are, but really helping us do the deep work that's going to make us more successful connecting with, engaging, and soliciting those prospects. And it comes down to a few things. Obviously, the wealth screening. Most of you probably have great enterprises for helping with that. You've got the resources to do it, but helping us understand who are most likely to support us. Inclination, where uh, what can we learn from their giving to other organizations that may be a good allegory? Is that the right word? Metaphor? I don't know. Anyway, may illustrate that they might have connection and inclination to us. If you haven't participated in relationship mapping or your team doesn't have the ability to do that, I would really encourage you to think about that because with the Great Barrier Reef Foundation, we were starting from scratch. They didn't have a database or relationships with a lot of these global philanthropists. So we did relationship mapping with their scientists, with their boards, with some of their donors. And we realized it was kind of like the Kevin Bacon game, even more efficient. We actually had much greater access to these folks than we had any idea, but we needed to do the research to figure out who is connected to who. And it allowed the gift officers and leadership to be much more successful. And then it's got to be integrated and coordinated, and that's one of the great sort of air traffic control roles that prospect development can play. Is making sure that we are coordinated and integrated here.
So we'll talk. We'll jump in here and following up kind of the process is that alone is not going to get us to where we need to go. Ultimately, we've talked a good deal about that partnership, but the principal giving is a team sport. As fundraisers, we're great at the relationship, but rarely, if ever, should it just be us. So partners bring that credibility. We've got some statistics here to support that, donor reported information to support these ideas. Partners bring credibility. They also kind of inspire that idea. Maybe we're on an author kick today, Jeff. I don't know. I'll talk about Seth
Right?
Godin.
Clearly.
Why not? Seth Godin talks about how people like us do things like this. And so partners that can create experiences, the most memorable moments rarely happen at the lunch meeting. They happen in classrooms, in labs, and personal accounts, firsthand accounts of those, or witnessing, experiencing those types of things can be so very motivating. People are influenced by people they respect. So the principal donor is influenced by identity or a sense of belonging or that shared purpose. Our job is to know who should be in the room, when they should be there, and specifically the role that they should play when they have the opportunity to be in front of that potential investor. The red box here when we do training sessions and in our practice, that gets a lot of attention. 7 connections, and sometimes once people sit back and they think about it, they go, "Oh wait, I think that actually adds up. That makes sense." Where I start to get a little bit nervous is when people start to use that as kind of a philanthropic hit list, and it really needs to be personal connections that are focused on the gift outcome. So it might be lovely to get invited to sit in the president's box for the football game, but I really want to make sure that as we're thinking about a cultivation strategy toward a significant gift outcome, that as I'm thinking about those people to help strengthen my ask, my invitation, and the ultimate impact, that those connections are endorsing this idea along the way. So it's not just about more people getting involved, it's about more people getting involved, reading from the same script and chasing that same outcome. Um, as we go on to the next one here, I want to talk about how when we do get everyone involved and contributing the different kinds of value, not just doing the same thing, each person having that unique role. So hopefully there's not a lot of big surprises here, though some folks are a little hesitant to get board members or other types of volunteers engaged in principal gift or even major gift cultivation. But let's go to the president first, that chief steward of the institution, the vision. I have a lot of clients right now that are going through presidential transitions. And this is a tough one, right? We want to make sure that the next person who's going to be leading the charge aligns with not only my values as a donor, but in the vision that I have for this institution. So working with folks to understand that while it's a critically important leader that we are going to entrust with this investment, that people are not permanent, right? And finding strategies to increase belief in the institution that is kind of more sustaining than sometimes a leadership tenure could be. Communicating ambition is part of their role, helping donors see not just what the institution does today, but what it can become. Board members provide that peer credibility. So they demonstrate that institutional leaders, they know what they're doing, and I'm personally invested in the mission. Unit executives, presidents, our vice presidents, deans, directors, clinicians, those unit leaders are both expected to be visionaries when it comes to things that are specific to their area of focus, but also the subject matter expert. They can articulate the why, the opportunity that matters. They make the vision in many ways believable because they can make it count on Monday. The volunteers extend the institution's reach. Volunteers create belonging and that social confidence. We are running just a little bit short on time here, Jeff, so I think we should just keep on marching.
Agreed.
Now we want to take action, and certainly thinking about how do we go from that prospect management to prospect strategy. And you know what, Jeff, maybe let's go ahead and jump to the next one here.
Sure.
And let's get into kind of the repeatable process at which we can go about developing intentional donor strategy. So starting with the end in mind is something I talk with folks about a great deal. So principal gift strategy should begin with a clearly defined objective. The goal is not always a solicitation. An early goal might include gaining permission to explore an idea together, to introduce a leader, to test an idea. When we're talking about fostering the right relationships, we spent some time talking about that, but introducing leaders intentionally based on the value that they bring and the role that they play at that point in the cultivation cycle, and setting some milestones along the way. This is not going to happen in one conversation. So some examples of that might be agreement on a shared vision and alignment, engagement with a faculty or a program leader. Family involvement could be one of those milestones. Are we at the stage when we need to invite your family into the conversation? Invitations to co-create that opportunity. Celebrate the progress along the way and use the power of retail to remind the donor of where you've been as a way to keep moving forward toward where you're going together. And certainly those experiences, there was some great conversation in the Q&A about they have this desire for access and a seat at the table ongoing. So this maybe my closing comment here will be that principal gift strategy is more than the moves management that we've been talking about for a couple of decades. It is designing a journey. And that's why it remains so much more iterative than other types of philanthropic engagement.
All right, in the 2 minutes or so that we have left, I do want to make sure we hit on two things. First is, a lot of times folks think that we're celebrating the success of our principal gift program the minute the donor signs the document, and that's the goal, that's the end point. Honestly, that's kind of just the midpoint, or in some cases, the starting point, because there is such a need for there to be organizational alignment about how do we administer this gift? Can we do what the donor is asking us to do with this investment? And to accomplish that, we've really got to have significant implementation planning. If we're building a building, creating a new center, spinning off a new program, we've got to be able to do that, and we need to coordinate with our cross-functional partners to make that happen. We can't speak on behalf of the physical facilities plant team at a university. We also want to make sure that there is significant gift compliance, that we're spending the money in the way that the donor had asked us to, because man, is there no bigger way to stub your toe than misusing or underusing the gifts that they're making. So those gift acceptance policies really need to be in place, and your gifted agreements really need to be rock solid. It protects you and the donor. And then obviously stewardship and reporting is critical. We've got to make sure that we are doing a great job, a bang up job of reporting back to them. And by the way, the stewardship plan can't be something that we think about after the fact. We've got to think about that before the ink is dry on the proposal. All right, so the last thing, and we're not going to get to the last poll, which is too bad, but I do want to leave you with this. So, what can you do tomorrow? What when you wake up on Thursday morning? What are the things that you can do, regardless of whether you're a robust, well-resourced organization or a little bit more scrappy and you don't have the dedicated resources? So, the first thing I want you to do is to assess your own readiness. If a donor came to you tomorrow with the biggest gift that your organization's ever seen, where would you stub your toe? Where would you slow down? Because again, that answering those questions is going to help you determine what your next steps need to be. Is it around staffing and resourcing? Is it involving leadership, or are there other gaps within the organization? So answering that question is critical. Step two, you've got to build the infrastructure. This is not something that we can do overnight. You can't build a principal gift program overnight. So let's take that first step toward that, and that would be building the infrastructure, defining what principal gifts means for you, assigning ownership. Every prospect, every step, every element of our principal gift program needs to have ownership. Somebody waking up thinking about it every day. You've got to create the systems and processes around that. And you've got to execute with discipline. Establish those strategy meetings that are consistent, that follow a set agenda. So it's not just winging it. It's not different every time. It is a consistent way. When Michelle talks about the work that she does with a number of clients around principal gifts, what I hear so often is the consistent rigor toward those strategy meetings. You've got to engage your leadership, and you've got to commit to the discipline of this work. So with that, I will advance to our last uh, slide here. Thank you very much. This has been great. I appreciate you sticking with us a minute or two late. I get really excited about this stuff, but hopefully you do too as well. And Michelle, thank you for everything you did to make this success as well.
Yeah, right back at you, Jeff. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your week.
Bye, everyone.